Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Now on this video, I've taken the 10 most popular property related questions that have been sent to me from my social media platforms, and I'm going to answer them right here for you. So first up, number one, what is a HMO? Now a HMO is a housing classification, and you may see me talking about these quite a lot. Now it stands for a house in multiple occupation. Not of, in, a house in multiple occupation. And that's where if you have 3 or more people forming more than one household, then you have a HMO. Now, some people might get this a little bit confused because sometimes people think that if you've got a group of students and you put them all on one contract, therefore it deems one household and therefore you don't have a HMO. That's not correct, folks, okay? The contract's irrelevant when it comes to the classification. So it's simple. If you've got 3 or more people forming more than one household, then it is a HMO. What's a household? Well, the household classification can be found online. But if you use the test that you think that anything in your normal family household is a household, i.e. brother, sister, cousin, auntie, uncle, grandparents, cohabitee or partner and partner's children, then that's a household. But if you want the full definition, it is out there online for you to have a look at. Number 2, can landlords refuse pets? A lot of people are getting this a little bit confused at the moment, and a lot of people are thinking now that landlords cannot refuse pets, which isn't the case. Now at the moment, landlords can still refuse pets. They're not obliged to take pets on unless they use the government model tenancy agreement, which does stipulate that landlords must accept pets. But that's not a legal obligation. You don't have to use the government model tenancy agreement. You can still use the AST contract that you've been using before. That's likely to change. So next year when the renters reform bill comes in, then the standard default position will be that landlords have to accept pets unless they've got a very good reason not to. But that raises the whole question. If you've got a house share and several people are in there, some of them have got allergies to pets, some of them got allergies to dogs or cats, or worst case scenario, you've got somebody working nights, they come home at 9 o'clock in the morning, the postman comes, the dog starts barking, and then they get woken up. Or even if they've got a hamster or a gerbil, and it gets, because they're nocturnal, aren't they? They wake up at 3 a.m, they get into that little hamster wheel and they start running around in it for hours on end that goes for 4 or 5 hours, keeping the housemates up. I don't know. But anyway, I don't think pets are suitable for house shares in flats, houses, individual buy-to-let properties, etc. I don't have an issue with that. But in HMOs, it just simply isn't suitable. Number 3, how big do HMO rooms need to be? This is quite important. Now, there are mandatory minimum room size requirements in England for houses in multiple occupation. Now, these are mandatory minimum. Now, they are 6.51 metres squared for single occupation and 10.22 metres squared for double occupation for bedrooms. Now, those are the only 2 mandatory minimum size requirements. The living room, the bathroom, the kitchen, the dining room, they are all done at local level. So the local authority where you want to start investing will have their own interpretation of how big those rooms need to be. Now, I did mention that 6.51 and 10.22 are the minimum room size requirements. Your local authority can add to that if they want to. So if you don't know what they are, if you go online and download something called the Amenities Standards document for HMOs, in there it will tell you everything you need to know in order to make your property compliant. Next question, what is Article 4 direction? That's a really good question. Article 4 direction removes permitted development in certain areas. So Article 4 direction can be for anything. It could be to prevent a certain street from removing their bay window or from removing a chimney breast. It could be for lots and lots of different reasons. But for house shares or HMOs, local authorities have decided, not all of them, but some of them, to use Article 4 direction to prevent permitted development from a house which is planning class C3, into a small HMO, which is planning class C4. So areas that have got overdevelopment of HMOs that used to be able to change a house into a HMO under permitted development, if there's Article 4 in that area, then they will now need to apply for planning permission. Now, does that mean that it's impossible? No, it doesn't, because your local area will have their own set of rules when it comes down to what you need to adhere to. So, for example, in my area, we can't have any more than 10% HMOs within 100-metre radius. Every 5-bedroom property will need 3 private off-road car parking spaces, and you can't have a HMO directly next door, in front or behind. Now, provided you can meet all of that criteria, then the likelihood is you will be awarded planning permission. I've done it. I've been successful with it. But here's the thing. If the property was being used as a HMO before Article 4 direction, and if it's being continually used as a HMO and it hasn't changed, then it will be given grandfather rights, and the planning permission will stay with the property. So you can still buy property or do rent-to-rent or lease options on properties that are in an Article 4 direction area, because the planning permission will stay with the house. So you can still do it. It's not a problem. Next question, what is licensing? Licensing is something that local authorities put together to monitor the standards of certain properties, specifically HMOs. So HMOs, there are 2, maybe even 3 different types of licensing. You've got mandatory licensing, which starts at 5 or more people forming more than one household. And that's where mandatory licensing starts. Now, you can trade a HMO, which is 3 or more people, remember, forming more than one household, up to 4 people without the need of a mandatory HMO license. You don't need one. So it means that you don't need to get inspections, but you still need to be safe. You still need to make sure the property is safe for fire and everything else that you would be deemed to be a responsible landlord. So you can trade up to 5 people. You don't need a mandatory license until you hit 5. But some areas operate something called additional licensing. And additional licensing is for any HMO. So that means 3 or more people forming more than one household. So if your area's got additional licensing, you're going to need a license from the start for HMOs. If your area doesn't have additional licensing, then you don't need to apply for a license until you put the 5th person in. Next question, can I restrict my tenants' heating? My goodness, this is a question, isn't it? The simple answer is no. The HHSRS, that's the Housing Safety Standards for Rented Property, is very clear on this. The tenant needs to have full access to control the heating 24 hours a day. They need to be able to heat the communal areas to up to 21 degrees and their own bedrooms up to 18 degrees. Could be the other way around, but you get the point. So that means that they've got to be able to have access to the heating. So you can see lots of photos online, lots of videos online that people are restricting the thermostats, are putting boxes over them to prevent the tenants from being able to turn the heating up or down. That's not lawful. What is lawful is using smart devices that you can control on your mobile phone, so you can monitor the heating, so you know that if it's 21 degrees outside and the heating's set to 21 degrees, you can turn it down. There are lots of different gadgets that you can use to help you do that, but please don't restrict the thermostat. You're not allowed to do that. Don't restrict the boiler. You're not allowed to do that either. Next question, do I need to give 24 hours notice to enter a rented property? Specifically, a rented property, yes. So when a tenant signs an agreement, they sign to have exclusive occupation of either the room or the whole house and the quiet enjoyment of that property. So if you are running a single buy-to-let property, then you need to give your tenant 24 hours notice to go and do an inspection, and they need to give you authority to do so. If it's a HMO, then you only need to give 24 hours notice for their room, because the exclusive occupation is for their room, not for the whole house, which means you can enter the communal areas without giving any notice. But why wouldn't you give notice? It's polite to do so. You don't just really want to be turning up unless there's an emergency without telling the housemates you're going to be there. Next question, how long have I got to lodge a tenant's deposit? Okay, great question. So when a tenant gives you a deposit, you have to lodge that into one of the government approved deposit schemes. Now I use the DPS, the Deposit Protection Service. Other schemes are available. Now, once I receive that deposit, it gets lodged into the scheme, it gets transferred into their bank account, and then paperwork is sent to me that I then have to give to the tenant to prove that I've lodged it. Now, you get 30 days to lodge that deposit from the time that you've received it. If you don't lodge it in time, then the tenant can claim up to 3 times the deposit back. So be very careful. It will also restrict you at the moment from serving a Section 21 eviction notice if you haven't lodged that deposit in time. I know Section 21s are about to be repealed, but they are still in use at the moment. What happens if the deposit isn't lodged in time? Yeah, just covered that one. The tenant can claim up to 3 times the deposit back if you don't lodge it in time. And then the last question, what happens if I don't manage antisocial behaviour in my licensed property? Now, this is a great question, and this has come off the back of a video that I did on TikTok last week when I had to go and talk to a tenant about them causing ASB. And they were keeping the next door neighbour's children up till 3 a.m. and causing them not to be able to go to school. And it wasn't a one-off occasion. It happened over about 3 or 4 days. So I had to go and deal with it. Now, in a licensed property, part of those license stipulations are that the license holder needs to have a robust policy in dealing with antisocial behaviour. If it's not dealt with pragmatically, and if it's not dealt with quickly, then the local authority can fine the license holder and ultimately take away their license, stopping them from trading. And it's not just that one license, it's all of the licenses. So it's really, really serious. And when people see me dealing with antisocial behaviour, they say, well, Rick, you can't do that. It's not up to you. When people have friends around, and it is in a licensed property. It's very different than having a normal single buy-to-let. Licensed properties are monitored, and the license conditions are quite tough for the landlord and the license holder to adhere to. So if you don't deal with ASB and the complaint goes to the council then will intervene, and it could mean that you get fined or you lose your license. There you have it, folks. Those are this week's top 10 questions that I've had across my social medias. Now, if you've got a question for me, use the comment box below, type it in here, and I'll bring this question out next week. I'll give you an answer. And in the meantime, don't forget to give me a follow.